During the summer of 2018, we took venture on a meander around southeast Alaska, covering some 3,800 nautical miles over 3.5 months. This chart illustrates our wandering course. We set out from Sydney on Vancouver Island and make our way through British Columbia to the town of Prince Rupert. Venture's cockpit fills with gear, mostly photographic. Impressive ferries provide a vital link. Here in the coastal town of Nanaimo, a float plane heads for one of the offshore islands. Like Montague Harbor on Galiano Island. As indicated by the red arrows on the chart plotter, strong currents course through the narrow passes. For safe navigation, close attention must be paid to the tides, as this tug and tow are doing. We head up Knight Inlet to Glendale Cove, a well-known spot for bear watching. Using the tender at high tide, we are able to get close without disturbing their activity. Usually we think of bears as voracious carnivores, but in fact, most of their diet is vegetarian. Early in the season, before the availability of berries or salmon, bear graze on sedge grass, which is up to 25% protein. Along this coast, pilings are often all that remains of earlier settlements. They provide a convenient perch for a bald eagle. Further along the shore, bears flip over heavy rocks with ease, searching for crabs and other small prey. Further up Knight Inlet, we head for Cascade Point, to visit a waterfall we remember from a previous visit. The water is deep at the base of the falls, and we are able to take venture into the very heart of the torrent. North of Vancouver Island, the Inside Passage is no longer inside for about 30 miles, and it is exposed to the wide Pacific Ocean. Captain Vancouver's ship, Discovery, and accompanying vessel Chatham both went aground in this area in 1792. After safely passing Cape Caution, we moor for the night in an anchorage named Schooner Retreat. We take the small tender ashore and explore the forest and beach. We marvel at how fallen trees become nurseries for new growth. On the beach they become bone-white natural sculptures. This lichen has the delightful name of Methuselah's beard. Canadian lighthouses, even those no longer manned, are always immaculate with their signature red roofs. We continue up the Inside Passage. Along the way, we pass a series of impressive waterfalls. Along with two other cruising boats, we enter Low Inlet, at the head of which high volume but low rise falls discharge into Nettle Basin, fed by a large lake through Komoda River. For some reason, these falls always produced lots of foam. We navigate narrow but scenic Granville Channel to the port of Prince Rupert, which has the deepest natural harbour in North America. It can handle post-Panamax container ships seen here. Being so far north, it is just 11 days sailing to Shanghai and 6 days by rail to Chicago. Continuing north from Prince Rupert, we cross the border from Canada into Alaska in the middle of Dixon Entrance, the second major spot where the inside passage is exposed to the open Pacific Ocean. Ketchikan is a major port of call for cruise ships. They tower over the shoreside buildings and disgorge literally thousands of visitors. We try for a berth in the downtown harbour, but venture is too large for the available slips. We move to Bar Harbour outside of town and take a vacant berth among commercial vessels. Here we are subject to customs and immigration inspection. Predictably, it is raining. Ketchikan averages 140 inches per year. After one day, we move on to the small hamlet of Myers Chuck, 40 miles north of Ketchikan. We tie up at the Free Government Dock. Smoke issues from the chimneys of the personal cabins that overlook the inlet. You can only reach this spot by boat or float plane. The last de Havilland Beaver came off the production line in 1967, so this plane must be at least 50 years old, and probably much more than that. It seems that no better design has surfaced since that time. I am always impressed by the skill of the pilots coming alongside with the engines switched off. The population of Myers Chuck swells to maybe 20 in the summer months, but drops to less than 5 during the winter. Departure is a casual affair. The ramp down to the dock is long and very steep at low tide. It is Memorial Day, and we are fortunate to be invited to pizza night at a cabin belonging to a Ketchikan doctor. Like most cabins, this was self-built, including driving the pilings. Just bring your own pizza toppings and booze.
So is this little bag of prawns? Is that
Wonderful. Yeah, January on Kauai. Came back in February.
The post office across the water is accessible only by boat. The mail plane arrives every Wednesday, and a flag is raised on Thursday when the mail is sorted and ready for pickup. We enter the narrow, twisting Wrangell Narrows with its 62 navigation beacons over its 22-mile length that vary wildly in size and type. Strong tides flow in and out at both ends. It is with us as we enter at the southern end, which means it'll be against us at the other. Heading north, markers are green to port with odd numbers and red to starboard. In places, up to 13 markers can be seen at one time, all flashing red or green. At night it is hard to tell which are closer. In fog they can't be seen at all, and it's best to wait until they can. Ranges, also known as leading marks, delineate the course between beacons. At marker 58 we are off the town of Petersburg. On this occasion we do not stop, but dally long enough for me to transmit my blog by email. Buoy 62 marks the northern end of the Narrows. It is always occupied by seals. It is here I always get the feeling that this is the start to the real Alaska. Concealed behind these clouds are huge snow-capped mountains and glaciers. We anchor for the night in Chatham Bay, where a dramatic sunset colours the sky. We have been watching for whales and other wildlife ever since leaving Vancouver Island, but having now reached prime whale-watching territory, our collective eyes eagerly search the waters under perfect conditions. Thus far, my experience with whale watching has been limited to frustrating glimpses, a fin, a tail, or a blow. This pattern continues as we proceed down Frederick Sound, around the Five Fingers Islands and Lighthouse. Pacific white-sided dolphins briefly weave intricate patterns around Venture's bow. In Chatham Strait, a humpback whale performs a series of snaps with his slender pectoral fins. Research has shown that the knobs on the leading edge reduce drag by 32%, provide 8% improvement in lift, and an increased angle of attack by 40%, together contributing tighter circles in bubble net feeding, an activity we hope to observe. Suddenly, without warning, a full breach. Just one. A miracle to catch on camera. We explore every inlet along the east coast of beautiful and dramatic Baranof Island. In Paterson Bay, we happen across the unusual sight of a single humpback bubble feeding entirely on his or her own. This one whale beautifully illustrates this technique, in which usually a group of whales dive beneath a school of fish and swim in an ever-shrinking circle, blowing bubbles from their blowholes. This column of bubbles surrounds the school, forcing the fish upward, corralling them into a group through which the whales erupt en masse with their mouths wide open. Later, in Chatham Strait and Freshwater Bay on Ketchikan Island, we observe large pods of whales engaged in a series of determined and multiple feeding hunts using this dramatic technique. We divert from the conventional inside passage just north of Petersburg and turn west into Frederick Sound. There are many beautiful places in southeast Alaska, but Baranof and Chichikov Islands stand out. We take refuge from the soggy weather in Little Port Walter. Shortly after dropping the hook, an Alaska fish and game vessel, Medea, enters the small bay and anchors in front of their shoreside facilities. The following morning, in heavy rain, we take a quick look at tiny Toledo Harbor, large enough for only one boat the size of Venture. We bear it in mind for future reference. Moving north, a distant waterfall gushes from the dense forest. We enter Deep Cove and proceed, spellbound, to its head. The rain and low clouds add mystery and drama to the spectacular scene. We turn into adjacent Paterson Bay, threading our way past precipitous slopes to its extreme northern end. Cliffs still bear the scars of sliding glaciers. We next enter Gut Bay, where during the winter of 1995, French journalist Michel and her companion Thomas spent 5 months frozen into the ice aboard her 42-foot steel sailboat, Nuage. Willy wars gusted to 80 miles per hour, and avalanches roared down precipitous mountains into the bay. Icebound for 5 months, they became immersed in this solitary wilderness, surrounded by wildlife and the ethereal colors of the frozen landscape. Further north is Red Bluff, its entrance cunningly concealed by a pattern of islands. This is one of the few anchorages on Baranof we have visited before. Warm Springs is another bay with a magnificent waterfall. We arrive early, so there is room for us to tie up at the dock. Hot water from natural springs high up above the village is piped down to 3 small cabins. It is very calming to lie soaking in its warm, silky water, looking out over the natural landscape. Warm Springs is only accessible by boat or float plane. We retrace our course down Chatham Strait and enter the northern arm of Tackett Bay. The following morning I shoot video of Venture leaving this spectacular inlet. It is now time for us to cross to the west coast of Baranof through aptly named Peril Strait. The name is a direct translation from the Russian, which I won't attempt to pronounce. We transit Dead Man Reach and take a look at Poison Cove. These sinister names stem from a tragic incident when, during a fur seal hunting expedition led by Alexander Baranof in 1799, 150 Aleut hunters died agonizing deaths after eating poisonous shellfish. The pin marks the cove. The main perils in Peril Strait are Sergius and Kakuk Narrows, where the currents are ferocious. Consulting tide tables is essential when planning transit times. In Salisbury Sound, Venture lifts to the swells from the Pacific Ocean. Propelled by a brisk wind, low clouds scurry over the forested slopes. We spot a pair of yearling grizzlies foraging along the shore. We launch the tender to get a bit closer. They are very well aware of our presence, but pay us scant attention. The following day, we head down Neva Strait and crest off Sound on our way to Sitka. The summit of Mount Edgecombe carries little snow. Settled by the Tlingit people for more than 10,000 years, the first Russians arrived in 1799. They established the town of New Archangel in 1804 after a fierce battle with the Tlingit. Venture is docked in the place marked by the red pin. Evidence of Russian influence endures in the Orthodox Church with its beautiful interior. nesting Russian dolls, seen here through a shop window. The neglected and overgrown Russian cemetery, with its ravens and decaying decapitated statues. Tlingit culture can be seen in the historic park and museum, with its numerous totems and exhibits. This spotted owl is one of the guests at the Raptor Center for injured birds. Outside of town, all local roads simply come to an end. Leaving Sitka, it would have been shorter to travel up the exposed west coast of Ketchikan Island. Preferring smoother waters, we decide to retrace our course up Peril Strait. We spend the night in Indian Cove, with a view of the magnificent coastal mountains. The following morning, we venture into Cross Sound. A skein of mist hovers over the crags. It is here that swirling currents of the outgoing tide confront the incoming power of the ocean. We consider continuing up the coast to Lituya Bay, the site of the largest tsunami wave ever recorded. But prudence dictates we turn back at Cape Spencer Lighthouse, concerned we could be trapped on the wrong side of the bay's dangerous entrance by an upcoming change in the weather. We follow Lisiansky Strait to the isolated town of Pelican, which is served by 2 ferries per month in the summer and just 1 in the winter. Float planes are the main form of access, often in the shape of a venerable de Havilland beaver, dwarfed by the surrounding mountains. Here again we see examples of the skills of the pilots bringing their craft alongside the dock. With the volume of traffic, it is necessary to move one aircraft to make room for another. Like virtually every town in this area, the structures are built on pilings driven into the water, and the streets are boardwalks. These boats are lined up outside a tourist hotel. Planes do not stop long and are soon on their way. We backtrack down the strait and call at the small town of Elfin Cove. The main dock is almost deserted when we arrive early in the day. Here too, most of the buildings are on pilings, and boardwalks link everything together. Elfin Cove means elves, and they appear in odd places, like hiding under the goat's beard. Some are quite rude. I've heard of flipping houses, but this is ridiculous. A pilot boat is based here for transferring pilots to and from cruise ships arriving and leaving inland waters. Back at the main dock, the charter fishing boats have returned. The fish cleaning tables are busy. Among the catch are colourful rockfish, which have a life expectancy of 60 to 75 years. So we have to wait that long to see these fish replaced. These are small halibut, and this is a big one, but they come much bigger. The following morning, the fish boats leave around 8 o'clock for another day on the heaving ocean. They are replaced by a series of float planes, bringing packages and new customers, and taking departing guests with their boxes of frozen fish. Elfin Cove has no ferry service, so relies on private boats and float planes for access. We take our leave and cross the strait towards the mountains in Dundas Bay. We pass a mini cruise ship, one of several that provide adventure cruises through these and other waters. Note the kayaks. We proceed deep into the head of the bay and pass large numbers of otters, mostly females floating on their backs with their young, called kits, on their stomachs. Once at anchor, it is time to retrieve food from our 8 cubic foot freezer on the flying bridge. Like all Flemings, Venture has a compact, practical galley with an induction cooktop equipped with clamps to keep the pots in place. Spaghetti with homemade sauce is a simple and frequently requested dish.
It is special. You use the left hand.
Great stuff, Tony. Thank you.
As part of our meandering itinerary, we head south down Chatham Strait to the Bay of Pillars on Vancouver Island and poke around to see what we can discover. Jellyfish, those strange amorphous creatures, are a surprisingly common sight during the summer months. Bull kelp, on the surface, is a warning of shallow water. It is almost magical when seen from below. We head north up Chatham Strait in blustery conditions. We enter Tackett Bay, where a handful of seiners are sitting out the 4th of July, waiting for a fish opening the following morning. The entire Pacific Northwest awaits the arrival of salmon returning from their time in the open ocean. Bears, seals, eagles, gulls, ravens, orcas, and of course humans, to name a few. Here, Seiners lay out large nets with the fish boat at one end and the bathtub-like boat, called a skiff, at the other, to entrap large numbers of fish. Seals haul out on the buoy, marking the approach to Petersburg. Steam issuing from the fish processing plants indicates they are fully active. We moor in the bustling harbour. The harbour is busy with commercial boats. Lady Jane is returning, low in the water, full of fish. After unloading their catch, other boats are busy taking on fuel and ice. The multitude of fenders alongside the Santa Lazaria indicate she is a tender, a boat to which fish boats can bring their catch to allow them to keep fishing, saving them a return to port. She is filling her hold with crushed ice. Here is one of the skiffs used to deploy a seiner's net. They are carried on the aft deck when not in use. Using a small handheld waterproof camera, I'm able to film a sampling of the anemones and other life forms which make their living attached to the docks. We set out from Petersburg for the LeConte Glacier. We have previously skipped this place, partly because we were on our way to somewhere else, and partly because of discouraging comments in the invaluable Hemingway Douglas Guide. However, it turns out not to be that hazardous, and infinitely worth the diversion. Almost immediately, we find ourselves surrounded by towering mountains and sizable ice floes carved from the glacier. Numerous seals are hauled out on the floating pack ice. It becomes clear that, at least from the route we have chosen, the ice is far too dense for us to reach and depart the glacier face within a reasonable time. We remain for half an hour and then slowly reverse our course. We pass some wonderfully shaped ice floes. We approach a towering island of ice, beautiful, elegant, and potentially deadly. A small sightseeing boat appears. It turns and passes immediately beneath the glistening summit. We continue, perilously close to the opposite end of the floe. Suddenly, and without warning, it lets go, and tons of ice plummet into the water at the exact spot where the small boat had been just seconds earlier. A miraculous escape, and a stark reminder to ourselves and others the importance of keeping well clear of these alluring beauties. And the risk is not just from above. When they capsize, hidden spurs can swiftly erupt under your boat from beneath the surface. We move on through calm waters, up Stevens Passage towards Tracy Arm. The narrow entrance into Holcomb Bay is frequently turbulent and studded with ice floes carved from north and south Sawyer glaciers in Tracy Arm and from Dawes Glacier at the head of Endicott Arm. We anchor for the night in a small unnamed cove off Holcomb Bay. The red pin shows our location. Around midnight, a large ice floe sneaks into the bay through the narrow gap and threatens to snuggle up against Venture, causing us to up anchor and move to a different location within the bay. The following morning, the errant floe is grounded on the beach, revealing its full, impressive size. We reversed course down Endicott Arm and into Stevens Passage, where the fog closes in. We reduce speed and watch for ice floes on the radar. They materialize out of the gloom. Eventually, the mist begins to lift. We spend the night in Tackett, a few miles south of Juneau.